Good morning. Welcome back to the Morning Minute Meditation here at the Higher Grounds podcast. My life verse is Isaiah 40, verse 8. The grass withereth and the flower faileth, and it falleth away, the Bible very simply says. But the important part is the word of our God standeth forever. Conversely, using the same illustration, the Apostle Peter in 1 Peter chapter number 1 makes this statement. He said, "For flesh is as grass, and the glory, all the glory of man as the flower of grass." Then he says, "The grass withereth, and the flower thereof falleth away." Isn't it interesting using the same illustration of one lasting forever and the other, of course, fading away? The grass withereth, and the flower fadeth. And so does humanity. We live and we die. 78% of athletes, according to Fox News, lose their wealth and fame and fortune within 3 years of retirement from their career. Isn't that interesting? Men who have lived their lives for one purpose and have been recognized for that purpose and have been lauded for that purpose, within 3 years are broke and forgotten. If I were to ask you who Owen D. Young is, or Harlow Curtis, or Pierre Lavelle, or Hugh S. Johnson, if I were to ask you those names and who they are, most of you couldn't tell and do not know. But yet Time magazine called them the men of the year at one year or another. In other words, the whole world knew who they were for a short amount of time, and they're gone. There's a lot of emphasis placed upon fame and fortune and notoriety. As a matter of fact, I saw it in the business world when I worked in business, men jockeying for position and trying to do little things to be known. And since I've been in the ministry over the last 30 years, I have seen men do that over and over again. And I'm sure I will sit back and watch the circus until I am dead. Men jockeying for position and saying things and developing styles for notoriety and fame and for the laud and applause of men. And may I say, according to the Word of God, they have their reward. I hope they enjoy it while they're here. But there are men that this world, in their day, probably never really knew much of them as they could have or should have. But now God has allowed their fame to blossom and everyone in the world to know who they are. Men like Charles Haddon Spurgeon, A.W. Tozier, and men like Leonard Ravenhill. In other words, they gave their life for the cause of Christ, and now the world knows who they are. And for time and eternity, they'll be lauded for their efforts. Let me ask you a question. What are you living for? The futility of fame? And that's really all it is. The Kardashians will pass away and nobody will remember who they are. But there are some men who are laboring away in the simplicity of secrecy as they do a work for God, who will be lauded in the next generation. Hey, think on these things today and don't live your life in futility. God bless you, friend. See you tomorrow.